Thanks for tuning in to Crazy Mango Stories. Give a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for more betrayal stories. It was the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, the silence you know holds nothing good behind it. The house was too still when I stepped through the front door, the kind of stillness that presses against your chest. Outside, the sky had settled into a bruised jaded purple, with the sun long set, and all that was left was the quiet between me, the ticking clock on the wall, and the faint noise of a suitcase zipper being pulled upstairs. I already knew what I'd find when I got there, but nothing could have prepared me for the scene. Lisa, my wife, stood in the bedroom, her back turned to me as she folded clothes, stacking them neatly into the luggage laid open on the bed. There wasn't a shred of guilt in her movements. No hesitation. And then there was him, Michael, standing by the door, his arms crossed, looking at me with a smirk that could curdle blood. "I'm taking her," he said without missing a beat, that arrogant tone dripping with self-satisfaction. He didn't even flinch, didn't blink. Lisa didn't even look up. That's when I realized this wasn't just a betrayal. It was something far worse. I didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, watching them like they were strangers in my own home. The room felt too small, the air too thick. Lisa continued packing, folding her clothes with the same meticulous care she'd always shown. There was no apology in her movements, no regret. She was done with me, had been for a long time, it seemed. But now she didn't even bother pretending. Michael, on the other hand, leaned casually against the doorframe like he belonged there, like he hadn't just torn my life apart with that smug grin of his. His confidence made my blood boil. It was one thing to take my wife, but the arrogance, the nerve was what got to me. He had no fear, no doubt that he could walk out of my house with everything I'd spent years building. "And I'm taking her," he said again, this time with a hint of a challenge, like he was daring me to do something about it. I clenched my fists, feeling my nails dig into my palms. There was a part of me, an instinct, really, that wanted to lunge at him, to beat that smug look off his face. But I knew better than to give in to that rage. Not yet. If I lost control now, I'd lose everything. So this had to be handled right. I wasn't going to let him walk away without feeling the weight of what he'd done. They both needed to feel it. "So this what you want, Lisa?" My voice came out calmer than I expected. Cold, even. A kind of calm that hides a storm. She didn't answer right away. Just kept folding the clothes, one piece after another, like this was any other day. Finally, she looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time. Her expression was unreadable, no tears, no anger, just a hollow indifference that cut deeper than any outburst could have. "Yes, John, it's what I want. There it was. No hesitation, no second thoughts, just cold, hard truth. For years, I'd ignored the signs, too focused on work, too caught up in the routine of our life. I'd known something was wrong, deep down, but I'd buried it. I didn't want to face the reality that the woman I'd built a life with could be this heartless. But now there was no hiding from it. The truth was standing in front of me, staring me down with those dead eyes. Michael chuckled softly. "Guess that settles it." So that laugh, that goddamn laugh, was the breaking point. Something inside me snapped, and before I knew it, I was walking toward the closet. Lisa watched me, confused at first, but when I pulled out the gun, an old revolver my father had left me, her face finally showed a flicker of fear. "What the hell are you doing?" "John." Michael's voice wavered now, the cockiness draining from him as I checked the chamber, making sure it was loaded. His confidence faltered. "You can't be serious, man. Put that down." I looked at him, dead in the eye, my voice steady. "Neil." He didn't move at first, just stood there frozen, like he couldn't believe what was happening. Michael's face went pale as I held the gun steady, pointing it directly at him. For the first time, the smug confidence drained from his expression. His bravado was replaced by something more primal, fear. His eyes darted from me to Lisa, as if he expected her to step in and defuse the situation. But she just stood there, frozen, finally realizing how far things had gone. This was no longer about words or choices. This was about consequences. "Neil," I said again, my voice low and cold, the gun unwavering in my hand. Michael swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down as the reality of the situation set in. He raised his hand slowly, palms facing me as if that would somehow stop what was coming. "John, Simon, man, don't do this. We can talk about it. It doesn't have to go this way." I shook my head. "No, talking's over. You wanted to take her. You wanted to walk into my house and tear apart my life. Fine, but you're not leaving here on your feet." His eyes widened, and he took a step back, hitting the wall behind him. He glanced at Lisa again, but she remained silent, her face pale as a ghost. It was like she was watching the scene unfold in slow motion, powerless to stop what was coming next. For the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in years, genuine fear in her eyes. It wasn't for me. It wasn't for Michael. It was for herself. She realized she was no longer in control. I stepped closer to Michael, the barrel of the revolver now just inches from his chest. Get on your knees. He hesitated, his legs shaking. Please, let's just. Bang. Plane. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the room like a bomb going off. I hadn't aimed to kill him, not yet, but I had aimed to send a message. The bullet tore through his knee, shattering bone and sending him crumpling to the floor with a scream that would have woken the dead. Blood poured out onto the hardwood, pooling beneath him as he clutched his leg, howling in pain. Oh God, you shot me. You shot my fucking knee. So his voice was high-pitched now, the fear and agony mixing into something pathetic. For all that swagger, all that arrogance gone. He was nothing but a broken man, writhing on the floor like an animal. Lisa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she stumbled back. John, what are you doing? I didn't take my eyes off Michael. You think you can walk into my life, take everything from me, and just leave? So you think there are no consequences? Michael was sobbing now, begging. Please, John, I didn't mean Lisa. Just let me go. Please. I crouched down beside him, pressing the barrel of the gun against his temple. You don't get to decide how this ends. But you wanted to take something from me. Well, now I'm taking something from you. Tears streamed down his face, his bravado completely gone. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I could hear Michael sobbing as I stood over him, but his apologies fell on deaf ears. I wasn't interested in hearing him beg. He was no longer the cocky, smug bastard who thought he could walk out of here with my wife. Now he was just another man brought to his knees, broken and powerless, with blood pooling under him. The gun felt heavy in my hand, but it also felt like the only thing keeping me grounded. Lisa was standing by the dresser, her eyes wide and body trembling. For a moment, I thought she might say something, step forward, maybe even scream at me to stop. But she didn't. She just stood there, watching the man she had chosen over me bleed on the floor. John, please don't do this, Michael whimpered, his voice hoarse from screaming. He tried to crawl away, dragging his injured leg behind him, leaving a trail of blood across the floor. So I didn't mean for any of this. I followed him with slow, deliberate steps, keeping the gun trained on him. Didn't mean for what, Michael? I didn't mean to fuck my wife. Didn't mean to walk into my house and act like you owned it. Or didn't mean to get caught. He flinched at every word, his face twisted in pain. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't think we just. You didn't think, I repeated coldly. That's the only honest thing you've said all night. Behind me, I could hear Lisa's breathing grow shallow. She took a step forward, finally finding her voice. John, this isn't the answer. Please, just let him go. We can end this now. No one else has to get hurt. I turned to look at her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw her for what she really was. Not the woman I had loved for years, not the wife I had built to life with. No, she was something else now, someone who had turned her back on everything we had shared. Someone who had looked me in the eyes and chosen him over me. So you think I care about hurting him? I asked, my voice low and venomous. You already hurt me more than he ever could. So this is about justice. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. No, this is about revenge. Don't do this. Don't throw everything away. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh in the stillness of the room. You think I'm the one throwing it all away? Lisa, you did that the moment you decided to fuck him behind my back. Michael whimpered again, trying to push himself up, but his injured leg buckled under him, sending him crashing back to the floor. He looked up at me with desperation, his face pale. Please, John, I'll leave. I'll never come back. Just let me go. And I crouched down, pressing the barrel of the gun against his forehead. His entire body froze, his breath coming in shallow gasps. No, Michael, you're not leaving. Not until you understand what you've done. He squeezed his eyes shut, sobbing. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. And I pulled the gun back just a little, giving him one last moment to breathe. Michael's sobs echoed through the room, mixing with the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. His blood smeared the floor, staining it like the irreversible damage he had done to my life. The gun, still heavy in my hand, felt like the only solid thing in the world. Everything else, my marriage, my home, my future, had already crumbled to dust. Lisa stood behind me, frozen in place, her tears now flowing freely. She wasn't crying for me, though. No, she was crying because she knew what was coming. Maybe she thought her tears would change something, that they'd make me reconsider. But it was too late for that. Way too late. John, she pleaded, her voice trembling. Please, put the gun down. We can talk about this. We can figure something out. Something out. I didn't turn to look at her. My eyes stayed locked, Michael, watching as he struggled to breathe, his face slick with hate and fear. Figure something out, I repeated, my voice flat, empty. There's nothing left to figure out, Lisa. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. DeMichael flinched as I spoke, his eyes darting around the room, searching for some escape that didn't exist. His hand shook violently as he tried to push himself backward, but he was pinned against the wall now, nowhere left to run. "I'll leave," he whimpered. "I'll leave town. You'll never see me again, I swear. Just don't kill me, man. Please." I crouched down beside him, close enough to see the terror in his eyes, close enough that he could smell the gunpowder from the revolver. "You don't get to walk out of here like nothing happened, Michael. You destroyed my life, when you don't just get to walk away." "John, stop," Lisa's voice cracked, but I didn't turn to her. I couldn't. Michael's breathing was shallow, his chest heaving with panic. I didn't mean for this to happen. We never thought you'd." "Then you never thought I'd find out?" I cut him off, my voice rising. "You thought I'd just keep working late, keep trusting you both while you tore my life apart?" His silence was answer enough. Lisa stepped closer, her voice desperate now. "John, don't do this. Don't throw your life away for him. He's not worth it." Got my grip tightened on the gun. She still didn't get it. She thought this was just about him. But it wasn't. It had never been about Michael. This was about what she did. The betrayal. The lies. The years of thinking we were building something together, only to find out it was all a sham. I stood up, turning to face her. "You think I care about him? This isn't about him, Lisa. This is about you. About the fact that you looked me in the eyes every day and lied." Her face crumpled and she took a shaky step back. "I never meant for it to go this far, John. I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound, too late. Michael tried to crawl again, whimpering as he dragged himself across the floor. To help the sight of him so weak, so pathetic, should have made me feel something pity, scudding teeth, any disgust, anything. But I felt nothing. The numbness had taken over completely. I turned back to him, raising the gun again. "You ruined everything. Please, John." Bang, bang. Bang. The second shot rang out louder than the first. Michael screamed, clutching his other knee as he collapsed completely, writhing in agony. The room fell silent again, except for his sobs, his pleas. Lisa gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, John." I didn't flinch. Lisa's scream pierced the air, sharp and raw, but it felt distant, like it belonged to another world. Michael was now a broken heap on the floor, both knees shattered, his sobs blending with the soft ticking of the clock. The smell of gunpowder lingered, mixing with the coppery scent of blood that had spread in dark pools beneath him. I should have felt something: relief, satisfaction, maybe even guilt. But all I felt was the weight of the gun in my hand and the numbness that had seeped into my bones. Lisa collapsed against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor, her hands still covering her face. Her sobs matched Michael's, though hers were different. Hers were full of fear. Not just fear for him, but fear for what I had become, maybe even fear for herself. She should have been afraid. She had no idea what would happen next. It took a step back, away from Michael, looking at him with cold detachment. He was still mumbling, pleading for mercy, but I'd heard enough of his voice. He didn't deserve my attention anymore. "And John," Lisa's voice was barely a whisper, shaky and broken. "Please stop this. We can fix it. We can make this right. Just stop." I turned my gaze to her, feeling nothing but the hollow ache of betrayal. It was like I was looking at a stranger, till the woman I had loved, the one I had devoted my life to, was gone. All that remained was this hollow shell. "Fix it? There's no fixing this, Lisa?" Her eyes, swollen and red from crying, locked onto mine. "I made a mistake, a horrible mistake. But we can move past this. We can find a way to get through it. We always have." I shook my head, feeling the weight of her words sinking into the emptiness inside me. "No, Lisa. Not this time. This isn't just a mistake. You didn't trip and fall into his bed. And you didn't accidentally tear apart everything we had. You chose this. You chose him." Tears streamed down her face as she choked on her words. "I didn't mean to. It just happened. I was confused, John. I didn't know what I was doing. Don't give me that bullshit." My voice came out harsher than I intended, but I couldn't stop it. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew. She flinched, recoiling from my words as if they were bullets. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." I crouched down in front of her, my eyes burning into hers. "Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't take away what you did. I gave you everything, and you threw it all away." Her body shook with sobs, her hands clutching at the fabric of her shirt, as if she could hold herself together with sheer wold. "Please, John, I'll do anything. Just don't destroy us." I stood up slowly, the gun still dangling in my hand. "We're already destroyed, Lisa. You did that the moment you let him into our life." She cried harder, curling in on herself as if she could shrink away from the truth. I watched her, feeling that same cold, empty detachment. There was nothing left here, nothing to salvage, nothing to save. This was the end, and she had made sure of it. I turned away from her, leaving her on the floor, broken and sobbing like the life we once had. My eyes fell back on Michael, writhing in his own blood, his cries softer now, more like whimpers. "Please, just let me go," he mumbled through the pain, his body trembling. I lowered the gun slightly, my grip loosening. "No, Michael, you're not getting off that easy." His eyes widened as I took a step closer. "No, please." The room went silent, the weight of what was coming hanging in the air like a guillotine waiting to fall. Michael's breathing was shallow now, each breath a struggle as he tried to keep himself conscious. His body was shaking, and blood continued to pool beneath him, soaking into the hardwood floor. So a scent of gunpowder mixed with the iron tang of blood, a thick cloud of violence that seemed to hang over the room, choking out any chance for reason or mercy. His face was pale, eyes wide with terror, darting between me and the gun in my hand, as though he could somehow will this nightmare to end. He couldn't. He couldn't. "John," his voice was barely a rasp now, weak and trembling. "Please, no more. I'll go. I'll leave. I'll never come back." I didn't reply. What could I say? His words were meaningless. There was no fixing what had happened here. No going back. He wanted out. He wanted to walk away from this mess, like he hadn't been the one to help destroy everything. But that wasn't how this worked. You don't get to break someone's life and walk away without paying the price. I stood over him, my chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths. The weight of the revolver in my hand felt heavier than before, like it was an extension of the anger that had building inside me for months, years maybe. I thought of all the times I let things slide, all the moments I ignored the signs that Lisa was drifting away, that our marriage was falling apart. But this was the final betrayal. I looked down at him, barely a man, now just a shaking, whimpering figure who had once thought he could walk into my life and take everything. So now he was nothing. "But do you think this is over?" I asked, my voice cold, distant. "You think you just get to walk out of here and pretend none of this happened?" His lips quivered, the pain in his eyes clear as he struggled to find the right words, the words that might save his life. I swear, John, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt you." "You never wanted to hurt me," I interrupted, my voice rising with every word. "You came into my home. You fucked my wife. You destroyed my life. And you didn't want to hurt me." Michael flinched, his entire body shaking now as his eyes flickered to the gun in my hand. He tried to push himself up again, but the agony in his shattered knees made it impossible. His hands slipped in the pool of blood beneath him, and he collapsed back onto the floor with a groan of pure anguish. I took a step closer, lowering myself down to his level, crouching beside him so he could look me in the eye. "Look at me, Michael?" He hesitated, tears streaming down his face as he turned his head to face me. I could see the fear in his eyes, the regret, but it was too late for that now. "If you thought you could take her," I said, my voice barely a whisper now, but the venom behind it was unmistakable. "You thought you could just waltz in here and walk out with everything that was mine." Where this lip quivered, but he didn't say anything. He didn't have to. "But now look at you," I continued, my voice soft, almost mocking. "On your knees, begging for your life. But you thought you were the big man, didn't you? Thought you could come in here, fuck my wife, and leave me with nothing." Though Michael's sobs grew louder, his body trembling violently as the full weight of what was happening settled in. "Please, John, I'll do anything. I'll leave. I'll never come near your Lisa again." I shook my head slowly, almost pitying him. "You don't get it, do you?" He blinked through the tears, confusion and terror flooding his face. "You already took everything from me," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "You and Lisa, you destroyed everything I spent my life building. You ruined my marriage. You ruined my home." His chest heaved as he struggled to breathe, the fear and pain nearly choking him. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I let out a slow, cold laugh, the sound harsh in the tense air. "Sorry doesn't fix this." Behind me, I could hear Lisa sobbing softly. She had moved closer, but still stayed back, as if she didn't dare get too close to the man holding the gun. Her tears no longer reached me. They meant nothing now. "John," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying, "please, stop this. You're not this person." I turned my head slightly, just enough to look at her out of the corner of my eye. "You don't know me anymore, Lisa. Not after this." Her face crumpled, and she took a small, hesitant step forward. "I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you, but this isn't the answer. We can still fix things. We can." "There's no fixing this," I cut her off, my voice as sharp as the gun in my hand. "You made your choice, Lisa. You both did." Her sobs grew louder, her face twisted in anguish. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I said coldly, "and now you both have to live with it." I turned my attention back to Michael, who was barely conscious now, his body weak from blood loss and pain. He was gasping for air, his eyes glassy and unfocused. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" I asked, my voice soft again, almost a whisper. "You wanted her. You wanted to take her away from me." He whimpered, his body trembling as he tried to form words. "I'm sorry. I stood up, straightening my back as I looked down at him, my finger twitching on the trigger. Sorry doesn't mean a thing to me now. Lisa's voice broke through the silence again, louder this time. John, stop. In a pause, my eyes still on Michael as I felt the weight of the gun in my hand. It would be so easy to end it right here, to put him out of his misery, to make sure he never walked out of this house alive. But as I stood there, the reality of what I was about to do settled in. The anger that had been driving me, the rage that had consumed me, began to ebb away, leaving me hollow. I lowered the gun slightly, just enough to keep it from pointing at Michael's head. Get out, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael blinked, confused. What? I took a step back, my eyes still locked on his. I said, get out. Crawl out of my house. If I ever see your face again, I won't miss next time. For a moment, he didn't move. His body was still, his mind trying to process what had just happened. Then, slowly, painfully, he began to drag himself across the floor, leaving a trail of blood behind him. He whimpered and cried as he pulled himself toward the door, every inch a struggle. I watched him go, my chest tight, my hands still shaking with the adrenaline that hadn't yet left my system. Behind me, Lisa stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. John, she whispered again, softer this time. What happens now? I didn't answer her. I couldn't. Instead, I watched Michael drag himself out of the house, his body disappearing into the night. The silence in the room became suffocating, and the weight of everything that happened pressed down on me like a mountain. Lisa sobbed softly behind me, her voice filled with sorrow, regret, and fear, but I couldn't face her. It's not yet. What happens now? I didn't know. The house was suffocatingly quiet after Michael had dragged himself out, leaving behind a trail of blood and whimpering cries that still echoed in my mind. It should have felt like a victory, some kind of release from the torment that had been boiling inside me. But instead, all I felt was a hollow ache, like something important had been scooped out of me and tossed aside. The gun hung loosely at my side, its weight no longer comforting. Eli crossed across the room, her back against the wall, staring at the bloodstains on the floor, where Michael had just been. Her sobs had quieted down, but her eyes were still wide with shock, with terror, with the reality of what had just happened. She wasn't looking at me like I was her husband anymore. No, that look had died long ago. Now she was looking at me like I was something else, something dangerous, something she couldn't predict. John, she said softly, her voice cracking with emotion. What happens now? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was too busy trying to make sense inside me. Too busy wondering how everything had come to this moment, where we were standing in a room soaked in betrayal and blood. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, impossible to bridge. I could feel her eyes on me, but I didn't meet them. I didn't want to see the woman she had become, the woman who had chosen Michael over me, who had shattered everything we had built. I kept my eyes on the floor, on the blood, on the gun in my hand. Lisa took a tentative step forward. Please say something. We can fix this. We can still. Fix this? I finally snapped, cutting her off. The anger surged back, a wave of fury that burned away the numbness for a brief moment. I raised my head and looked at her, really looked at her. There's no fixing this, Lisa. There's no coming back from this. Do you even understand what you've done? Her lips quivered, and more tears spilled down her cheeks. She shook her head, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. I know I made a mistake. I know I hurt you, but we can find a way through this. We always do, John. We always find a way. No, not this time. I shook my head, taking a few steps toward her. She flinched, stepping back, her body trembling. This wasn't a mistake, Lisa. It wasn't a one-time thing. You didn't trip and fall into bed with him by accident. You chose him. You lied to me over and over again. How do you come back from that? Her sobs broke through again, and she sank down to the floor, her back sliding against the wall until she was sitting on the cold hardwood. She wrapped her arms around her knees, curling in on herself like a child. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I felt lost, John. I didn't know what to do. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh and foreign in the room. Lost? You were lost? And you thought the solution was to crawl into bed with another man. That's how you found your way. She sobbed harder, her body shaking with the weight of it. I was confused. I thought maybe I didn't matter to you anymore. You were always working, always distant. I thought you didn't love me the way you used to. That's bullshit, I snapped, my anger flaring again. I've always been there for you, Lisa. I've always loved you. You're the one who stopped trying. You're the one who gave up on us. She looked up at me, her tear-filled eyes wide with desperation. I didn't give up. I was scared, John. I was scared of losing you, of losing us, and I made a mistake. I know I did, but please, we can still fix this. I stared at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything, now reduced to a sobbing mess on the floor. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that we could fix it, that somehow we could go back to the way things were. But I couldn't, because I knew it was a lie. There was no going back. The damage was done, and no amount of tears or apologies could undo it. I knelt down in front of her, the gun still in my hand, though I didn't raise it. I just held it there, a heavy reminder of everything that had happened tonight. Look at me, I said softly. She hesitated, then slowly raised her head, meeting my gaze. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face streaked with tears. There's nothing left, Lisa. You destroyed it. You destroyed us. My voice was cold, but not angry. Just empty. You can't fix this with apologies. You can't fix this at all. Her lip trembled, and she reached out for me, her fingers brushing against my arm. Please don't say that. I love you, John. I love you more than anything. I don't want to lose you. I stared at her hand on my arm, feeling nothing. Once, that touch would have meant the world to me. Once, I would have done anything to hold on to her. But now it was like she was a stranger. You already lost me, I whispered. The moment you let him into our life, you lost me. Her hand fell away, and she sobbed harder, curling back into herself, her body racked with guilt and sorrow. But I didn't feel any sympathy for her. I couldn't. And I stood up, stepping away from her and walking to the bedroom door. The weight of the gun still hung on my hand, but it no longer felt like the answer. It's not anymore. Ace burst trillium. As I reached the door, Lisa's broke through the silence again, small and broken. Where are you going? I paused, my back still to her. I'm leaving. She gasped, the sound full of panic. No, please, don't leave. We can work through this. We can fix it. I shook my head, not turning around. You can't fix what's already broken. And with that, I walked out. Out of the bedroom, out of the house, out of the life I had spent years building. The air outside was cool, crisp with the scent of fall. I took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs, trying to push away the numbness that had taken root inside me. But it didn't work. I still felt empty. And I looked back at the house, the place where everything had fallen apart, and knew that I couldn't stay. Not anymore. There was nothing left for me here, nothing but your dross and shattered dreams. So I walked away. The darkness swallowed me whole, and I realized that, for the first time in a long time, I was truly alone.